I was like, you know what? Let's do it. I love my favorite thing is laughter.
Keshet provides a really empowering space for folks to question their senses of self, their identities. I was so afraid. It's so easy to be afraid of the idea of being queer. Keshet makes it an exciting thing. You get to join this new community of folks who are here to love and support you.
When I was starting to build Keshet, the climate was so drastically different than it is today. Much of our early work was really, proving just the relevance and reality of our existence. When I think back to those days, I think back with a lot of sadness to all the Jewish educators and Jewish professionals who were queer, who told me that they would never come out in their places of employment because they were convinced that they would be fired immediately. And for people to understand that not to name us, not to see us, not to explicitly recognize and care for us, meant that we would not feel like we belong.
Growing up as a young Jew in New York, going to day schools and going to synagogue and being in a relatively traditional household, I don't think I gave much thought to anyone who wasn't like me at all. When I was ordained in 2002, I began my pulpit work as an assistant rabbi in Sharon, Massachusetts. And luckily enough, Keshet in its earlier days was really focused on the Boston Jewish community. I found myself in the position of being a leader, not an expert, but being open. And I think openness is the big gift of this work.
Keshet's mission, per se, is to teach the teachers. It's to create a generation of people who can then teach others so that the Jewish community eventually becomes organically accepting of the LGBTQ community.
We had a lot of resistance as we started to do education and training work with Jewish educational institutions. Plenty of organizations shut me down outright. I remember it was a kind of laughable triumph when our first Hebrew school gave us 15 minutes on the agenda of a teacher's meeting for a training. So things have come a long way since then. Now we do day-long trainings, year-long engagements with institutions. But again, that was about kind of making the case that there's work to do here.
Growing up in a world that does everything it can to tell you that trans people are bad, that there's something wrong with them, that hurts you, that eats at your soul. And it hit me hard. Going into the Shabbaton and reading prayers that thanked God for making me trans, I had never seen anything like that before. I was so used to being angry at myself. And for the first time, I was like, maybe there's something magical about this.
I'm really proud that we've created these spaces where teens feel like they can be themselves and feel powerful and beautiful, and it's amazing to hear a trans girl say, I felt beautiful for the first time.
I actually was a part of a group for Jewish queer youth of color through Keshet, which was really incredible. It was so empowering. I really began growing into myself, and now I'm very happy to say that I am grateful to be alive and to be trans.
Every rabbinical school has been touched by the work of inclusion. Even those that don't want to be have been affected by the incredibly important work of Keshet.
Keshet's work has made it possible for more and more young people, from children to adolescents, to come out in their communities. They have the confidence to do that now. And when there's a question, now those communities know where to go. I first encountered Keshet at a screening of the film Hineni, which was Keshet's first major production. And I believe it was in 2006 when Idit came to Northwest DC.
So what unfolded over the coming year or two was a process of our bringing on staff to enable us to really push the film out nationally, to develop a curriculum for use with kids grades 7 through 12, to accompany the film. And we started really growing as an organization because we were being bombarded with requests for film screenings from all around the country and around the world. Clearly, we decided there was a place for us to play a national role. And so it was really the film Hineni which propelled us to say, Hineni, we are here in the national arena and we have something to contribute. One of Keshet's successes that I'm most proud of is our work on the Yes on 3 campaign to preserve transgender rights in Massachusetts in 2018. There was a question put on the ballot that would have stripped trans folks of their rights in the state. And Keshet worked hard together with hundreds and hundreds of Jewish communities throughout the state to mobilize people to express their opposition to this hateful legislation. At the height of the campaign, we had over 70% of all synagogues and Jewish organizations in the state involved, which we're told is more than any other faith or ethnic group's mobilization in support of trans rights in American history.
I started working and making some online programming for queer Jewish youth, and the most powerful thing about that to me was that so many young people who would not have been able to access Keshet programming before were finally able to. There were young people who were Zooming in, hiding from their parents and from their families, but they were able to find solace in Keshet. I also am so grateful for all the leadership opportunities that Keshet has given me. I get to work with the most amazing staff making programming, and I always feel like I and so many other youth, we feel so empowered by the staff at Keshet.
Keshet provides the safe space for the Jewish community to engage one-on-one or in small groups and everything, where they don't feel intimidated, where they feel welcome, where they're not afraid to come in and speak their mind and then be dismissed and have to leave ashamed or anything like that. It's not an easy thing to do. Idit has navigated these waters beautifully, and so I hold Keshet up as a model for this kind of work, and I hope other organizations learn from it.
I have a few moments in my personal life that I deeply attribute to Keshet. And among the most tender of moments for me was when a student of mine, a young student, came out to me. And I was able, without having to dig deep into the recesses of something someone said to me before, to simply say, Mazel Tov, I'm so glad. Tell me what that means, and tell me how we can celebrate your moment together.
People often speak of one of Keshet's greatest strengths as the way that we meet people where they are. We meet people where they are, and then we gently, and sometimes a little bit less gently, push them to go further. And we do that because we come from a sensibility and a perspective that has deep faith that when it comes to most people, if you invite them to be their better selves, they will. And have just seen people stretch beyond what they thought possible.
Keshet is, not to be dramatic, but Keshet is saving young people's lives. And I know that because it saved my life. I know other folks for whom Keshet saved their lives.
What is left to be done in the Jewish community? Everything. What I think we need to do is first look in the mirror and think really closely about how ready I am to give of myself for the sake of someone else. It begins in our own hearts, knowing that the work is immense and we're not exempt from starting.
I see so much of the work of Keshet over the years as a work of shifting communal consciousness, a work of shifting the Jewish imagination. What exists in only a small number of Jewish communities still is a culture of real embrace and belonging. And that's the change gap in which a lot of our work happens. Some of that work is about helping leaders see that tolerance isn't enough, because of course LGBTQ Jews, just like all human beings, don't want to be tolerated. We want to be embraced, we want to feel at home, we want to feel like we belong.
My dear friend Jamie Crass, director of youth programs, told me this once, and I will never forget it. She said, the reason I work at Keshet is so that we can create a world in which there is no need for there to be a Keshet. So my ultimate dream goal is for there to be such a just and liberatory world that we won't need Keshet, that every space will be Keshet.